The year was 1991, and the world held its breath, teetering on the precipice of an unknown future. Yet, for some, the future lay not ahead on solid ground, but far above, among the silent stars. Sergei Krikalev, a man of quiet determination and unwavering focus, prepared for his ascent, his gaze fixed on the endless cosmic tapestry. He was an engineer, a cosmonaut, a son of the Soviet Union, entrusted with a vital mission aboard the Mir space station. For Sergei, this was the pinnacle of human achievement, a testament to his nation's enduring power, its vision for a communist future stretching into the cosmos. He packed his dreams, his tools, his carefully rationed supplies, anticipating a challenging but ultimately rewarding 5-month tour of duty. 5 months. A significant chunk of life, certainly, but a finite period, a calculated absence, after which he would return to the familiar embrace of gravity, the cheering crowds, the warm terrestrial air. The launch itself was a visceral symphony of controlled violence. A titan of steel and fire, shuddering and roaring, tore itself from the earth, shaking the very bones of the launch pad, of the steppes of Kazakhstan. Inside, Sergei felt the immense G-forces press him deep into his seat, a relentless, crushing weight, yet his heart soared. He was leaving the world behind, escaping its mundane realities, its petty squabbles, its simmering anxieties, for the pristine, unforgiving vacuum of space. He was ascending into the purity of orbit, where borders dissolved and the planet below became a marbled blue sphere, a fragile jewel suspended in infinite black. He reached Mir, a complex metal beast orbiting with elegant precision, a testament to human ingenuity. The station became his new home, a metallic womb hurtling through the void at 17,000 miles per hour. The days settled into a familiar rhythm: maintenance, experiments, long, silent hours gazing at the Earth, a hypnotic, ever-changing masterpiece of clouds and oceans, deserts and city lights. He saw hurricanes swirling like cosmic brushstrokes, the aurora borealis dancing with otherworldly grace, and the relentless creep of dawn painting the curvature of the planet with hues no artist could ever truly replicate. Below him, 7 billion lives unfolded, a maelstrom of hopes and fears, of births and deaths, of triumphs and struggles. But up here, there was a profound silence, a detachment, a sense of serene observation. He was a sentinel, a silent witness, far removed from the clamor. His mission was clear, his purpose defined. He was Sergei Krikalev, an astronaut, a proud citizen of the Soviet Union, executing his duty. Yet, as the weeks bled into months, a subtle dissonance began to permeate the airwaves that connected him to home. The voices from Mission Control, once crisp and confident, began to carry a new inflection, a strained urgency. The messages became slightly more guarded, laced with carefully chosen words that hinted at turbulence, at uncertainty. He heard whispers of political unrest, of economic instability, of growing dissent across the vast, sprawling empire he called home. He saw flickering news reports on the small, grainy monitors, images of protests, of fractured crowds, of flags that looked strangely unfamiliar. But up here, within the metallic shell of Mir, the scale of it all felt distant, almost unreal. He was an observer, and observers, by their nature, remain apart. He held on to the belief that these were transient storms, temporary challenges that his powerful nation, his enduring Soviet Union, would weather. His 5 months were nearing their end. He began to anticipate the familiar sensation of re-entry, the jolt of landing, the rush of fresh air, the scent of soil, the embraces of his loved ones. He yearned for the simple pleasures of gravity, a hot shower, a solid meal that didn't come in a tube. He was ready to come home. Then came the messages that changed everything. Not whispers, but pronouncements. Not hints, but stark, unyielding facts. The tone from ground control shifted from reassurance to something akin to apology, then to a grim, almost desperate candor. The Soviet Union, the monolithic power that had launched him into space, the nation that had defined his very existence, was tearing itself apart. He watched, horrified, as images flashed across his screen. The dismantling of statues, the tearing down of flags, the fiery debates in legislative halls, the angry mobs in the streets. He saw the very fabric of his world unraveling, not in slow motion, but with dizzying speed. First, a coup attempt, then the dramatic dissolution. republics declaring independence one after another, like dominoes falling in slow, agonizing succession. Kazakhstan, the very land from which he had launched, was now a sovereign nation, its borders shifting, its allegiances redefined. He was no longer a Soviet citizen in a Soviet craft, launched from Soviet soil. He was, what? An astronaut? Adrift, watching the tectonic plates of geopolitics shift beneath his feet, thousands of miles below. His expected return date came and went. No capsule, no rescue team. Just more messages, filled with convoluted explanations, funding chaos, bureaucratic nightmares. The ground infrastructure he relied on was fractured, its command structure dissolved, its purpose blurred. The nation that owned the Mir, the nation that employed him, the nation that had promised his return, no longer existed. He was a prisoner of orbit, a living relic of a bygone era, marooned in the cold, indifferent vacuum of space. The initial shock gave way to a chilling realization. He was forgotten. Not intentionally, perhaps, but certainly overlooked amidst the cataclysmic changes on Earth. How could anyone spare resources, or even a thought, for a lone cosmonaut when a vast empire was collapsing, when millions were grappling with economic ruin and political upheaval? The vast emptiness outside his window, once a source of serene wonder, now became a mirror of his own terrifying solitude. He was literally a man without a country, suspended between worlds, watching the funeral of his nation unfold from an impossible distance. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. His initial 5-month mission stretched beyond endurance to 6, 7, then 8 months. Each sunrise, each sunset, became a brutal reminder of his extended exile. The food, though still sufficient, grew monotonous, and the air, recycled and filtered, felt increasingly stale, heavy with the weight of his despair. He performed his duties with a robotic precision, a desperate clinging to routine, to purpose, in a universe that seemed to have abandoned him. He maintained the station, he conducted his experiments, he communicated with a fragmented, ever-changing ground control that now spoke with accents he didn't quite recognize, under flags he'd never sworn allegiance to. He became a symbol, though he didn't know it then, of a broken promise, of a world turned upside down. The psychological toll was immense. He fought the creeping tendrils of paranoia, the gnawing anxiety that he might never return, that he might become a permanent fixture in the sky, orbiting until the station failed or his own life simply faded away. He imagined his family, his wife, his children, living in a new world, a stranger's world without him, wondering if they remembered or had been forced to forget, to move on. He became hyper-aware of every creak, every shudder of the station, every flicker of the lights. Each anomaly, no matter how minor, was amplified by his isolation, whispering fears of catastrophic failure or a silent, suffocating death in the unforgiving void. The vast distances between stars, once abstract, became terrifyingly real, mirroring the chasm that had opened between him and humanity. He was an unintended pioneer, a reluctant Odysseus, charting a course through political turmoil from an impossible vantage point. Conversations with ground control became an exercise in surreal diplomacy. Who was he talking to? Which nation was he serving today? The space agency itself, once a titan of Soviet engineering, was now a bureaucratic ghost, pleading for funds from newly independent republics, from international partners, just to bring one man home. He was a bargaining chip, a logistical nightmare, an expensive problem to be solved in the midst of national bankruptcy. The irony was a bitter pill, the ultimate symbol of Soviet triumph, now a burden on its shattered remnants. He existed in a liminal space, neither truly here nor truly there, a ghost ship sailing above a ghost nation. His identity, once so clear, became blurred, then erased. He was just Sergei, a man in a machine, forgotten by time and tide. The silence pressed in, a constant, oppressive companion. The quiet hum of the life support systems, the gentle whir of the fans, the soft clink of metal against metal, these became the soundtrack to his solitude, the only sounds anchoring him to a fragile reality. He spoke to himself sometimes, just to hear a familiar voice, to confirm his own existence. He stared at the blue marble, searching for answers, for signs of hope, for any indication that the world below remembered its forgotten son. He trained, he exercised, he ate, he slept. each action a deliberate act of defiance against the despair that threatened to consume him. He clung to the simple fact of his breath, the beating of his heart, the continuation of his life, even as the life he knew disintegrated around him. His hair grew longer, his face thinner, etched with the strain of his ordeal. The weightlessness, once a marvel, became a constant reminder of his unnatural state, his detachment from the very force that held the world together. He longed for the simple pull of gravity, the comforting pressure of his own weight, the sensation of solid ground beneath his feet. After 311 days, an eternity in orbital terms, an agonizing stretch of hope and despair, a rescue plan was finally cobbled together. A capsule, a team, a destination. It wasn't the grand return he had once envisioned, but a quiet, almost clandestine operation, negotiated between fragmented powers and international agencies. The descent was violent, a fiery plunge back into the atmosphere, a jarring reacquaintance with the forces he had escaped almost a year earlier. The familiar G-forces pressed down, a welcome pressure after so long without it. The heat, the noise, the shaking, it was all part of the journey home, a brutal re-entry into reality. The capsule slammed into the Kazakh steppes, no longer Soviet land, but foreign territory, a stark reminder of how profoundly the world had changed beneath his feet. He emerged, blinking into the harsh sunlight, a gaunt, disoriented figure. The air, crisp and cold, was a shock to his lungs, a revelation to his senses. He tried to stand, but his legs, weakened by months of weightlessness, buckled beneath him. They carried him, these strangers, these rescuers from a new world, a world he no longer recognized. They wore different uniforms, spoke different languages, their faces a mixture of awe and pity. He was helped into a waiting vehicle, the tremors in his body not just from re-entry, but from the immense psychological burden finally releasing its grip. He looked around, searching for familiar faces, for the old symbols, the red banners, the Soviet stars. They were gone, replaced by new flags, new insignia, new faces. He was back on Earth, yes, but it was not the Earth he had left. It was a foreign land, a strange future he now had to learn to navigate all over again. The media, what was left of it, clung to his story, an anachronism, a tragic hero. They gave him a name, a label that would follow him, haunt him, define him, the last Soviet citizen. It was a title steeped in a bitter irony, a monument to a collapsed empire, a testament to his unwitting role in its final, fading act. He was the last living vestige of a nation that no longer existed, a ghost of history, still breathing, still walking. His return was a miracle, a triumph of endurance, a human story against an epic backdrop of political collapse. But the cruelest twist of fate awaited him on the ground. The state that had launched him, the system that had promised his security, had vanished, and with it, the value of his sacrifice. His salary, paid in the currency of a fallen empire, had been decimated by hyperinflation. He had spent 311 days orbiting a dying world, a silent, unwilling participant in its final throes, only to return to an Earth where his months of dedication, his unimaginable isolation, his very suffering had been rendered financially worthless. The paper rubles he had earned, once the symbol of his hard work and dedication, were now barely worth the paper they were printed on. The grand communist experiment had collapsed, leaving behind economic chaos, and Sergei Krikalev, the last Soviet citizen, was just another casualty, his extraordinary ordeal reduced to a footnote in the ledger of financial ruin. He had transcended Earth, witnessed its sublime beauty and its brutal divisions from a cosmic distance, endured unimaginable psychological torment, only to land in a world where the most basic human needs, like financial stability, had become a desperate struggle. The weight of gravity, once so longed for, now felt like the crushing burden of a new, uncertain reality. He was home, but the home he knew was gone. He was free, but the freedom came at a cost he could never have anticipated. His journey was a testament to the human spirit's capacity for endurance, a chilling reminder of how quickly the world can change, how fragile even the most powerful empires can be. And in the silent, haunted eyes of Sergei Krikalev, the last Soviet citizen, one could see the profound, lingering echoes of a world that was, and a future that arrived, unbidden and unrecognizable. The cost of ambition. the price of service, the ultimate heartbreak of being a man out of time, orbiting a collapsing dream.